Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal. I'm somebody who loves to play my rogue, but I cannot help but play multiple characters at once. And as someone who has one of each class at max level, I'm always looking out for new ways to gear them out as efficiently as possible. And I'm looking to obtain the most amount of gains for the least amount of effort. And I found that this week's Firelands Timewalking event has been fantastic when it comes to getting gear on every one of your alts. Most players are familiar with Timewalking dungeons, which are a great stepping stone for a fresh level 70 character, but I noticed not everyone is familiar with Timewalking raids, which are filled with champion track gear that can drop from every single boss fight, with 2 weekly quests that can award you additional champion and hero track gear, as well as unique cosmetic rewards that can be obtained from those Timewalking eras. So, in today's video, I wanted to go over a fast method of how to maximize Timewalking weeks, highlighting the gear rewards, how to take advantage of Timewalking gear scaling, as well as the current Firelands Timewalking raid. But right before that, most of you guys watching these kind of guide videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway. Especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight 10.2.5 or any of the future updates going forward. First of all, for Timewalking we have dungeons, which I think a lot of players will be familiar with. Dungeons are a fantastic stepping stone when it comes to gearing alts, and award blue adventurer gear, which is also on the upgrade track, which means it can be further upgraded with 5 stones to reach higher levels. You can also buy Timewalking gear from the Timewalking vendor, which is going to be different for every single Timewalking week. The gear is cheap but not ideal. It is a nice way to fill out some of your slots if you have a little bit of that Timewalking currency on the side. But like I said, all of this gear is great starter gear, but definitely not some of the most lucrative items that you can collect from the Timewalking weeks. Timewalking events also come with a quest where if you complete 5 dungeons, it'll grant you champion rank gear from the recent Emergency raid, which can offer solid bits of upgrades from unique weapons, trinkets, or even items that can be then later catalyzed into tier sets. It doesn't offer tier set gear directly, but still any of the upgrades that come from these chests is a fantastic upgrade that's worth your while on a fresh level 70 alt. For TBC, Wrath, and Cataclysm Timewalking, we also have a raid that accompanies that Timewalking week, and hopefully we'll see additions of future Timewalking raids for Pandaria, Battle for Azeroth, and so on. Because, and this is mostly my opinion, I think Timewalking raids is where you should spend majority of your time in when it comes to the Timewalking weeks. First things first, slaying any of the bosses from a Timewalking raid has a chance to award you champion track gear from that raid instance. And with raids such as Outlaw, which are packed with so many bosses, there's always a chance for someone to make it out like a bandit out of that raid instance with so much loot. Plus, the bosses inside of the Timewalking raids are much easier than the current raid fights of Emergency, specifically when it comes to mechanics. For the most part, the TBC and the Wrath bosses are a tank and spank, where you stand there and DPS them down until they're dead. The Cataclysm bosses do have a few more mechanics than most, but otherwise are still easy to get into. The scaling in Timewalking raids also means that gear, for the most part, doesn't really matter. In fact, certain items from older expansions are actually made stronger because of that scaling, meaning that a low geared or no geared character can be just as impactful as a fully mythic raid geared character, which makes it a ton easier to find groups to join into. When looking to join the Emergency raid, people are always looking for higher item levels and AOTC boss achievements, but in Timewalking, everybody is basically on the same even ground, unless you have a special Timewalking gear set, which means you might actually be ahead of the competition. Slaying raid bosses also allows you to clear the dungeon weekly quest, so that makes it a 2-for-1 combo, but also the raids themselves come with a quest that will offer you hero track gear for defeating the final boss of that raid. There's a lot of groups that do boss skips to the final raids in LFG also, which makes it much easier if you're just trying to farm up some hero track gear and want to skip out on the champion gear entirely. Getting that raid box is also useful if you're trying to get mounts and pets from those Timewalking eras, which is how I've been able to get Invincible when doing the Ulduar raid, but also the Experiment 12B from the recent Cataclysm raid, which I think is a fantastic bonus on top of being able to outfit and gear out your characters. If you are interested in diving into some time walking raids, you don't necessarily need any special gear. However, making a full time walking set with some gear that scales excellently in some lower level content could be helpful in the process. And the best part of this alternative gearing method is all of these items are fairly easy to get into. If you have old gear from Battle for Azeroth, like if you have the Heart of Azeroth with the essences, Azerite gear, or even the legendary cloak, all those items scale excellently inside of time walking instances. Also, items with multiple sockets scale super well, or even gear with any sockets whatsoever, so you can be on the lookout for items from TBC, Wrath, or even Siege of Orgrimmar raid. Also, a lot of the old trinkets scale super well. One of the easiest ones to get is an armored Elec Tusk in Warlords or General Zones, which is a strong option for most DPS classes. For the most part, you don't really need a guide to get into some of the time walking raids. TBC and Wrath raids in particular are fairly easy to get into, but as of this week we have Cataclysm raid of Firelands, which does come with a handful of mechanics that you may want to pay attention to in order to have an easier time inside of that instance. The first boss will be Bentalak, the spider boss of the instance. For this fight, you don't want to take the webs to go up to the second level of the boss room. Instead, have the entire raid stay down until the boss comes down to you, then lust and burn the boss. The Rocky Boy Rhyolith boss has two legs, the left and the right one, that you can DPS separately. You basically want to DPS the leg to make the boss turn in that direction, DPS the left one to make him turn left, and DPS the right to make him go right. The basic gist is you want to keep the boss towards the center of the arena, walking over volcanoes until his armor breaks entirely. And you want to keep him away from the lava on the edge of the boss room, otherwise he may cause a raid wipe. Alice Wizard, the bird boss, has a handful of mechanics. The first one will be the feathers that she drops on the ground, which the DPS will want to pick up and then fly after the boss to DPS it down. The rest of the raid will have to stay down below to DPS any adds that spawn, and tanks will want to stand next to the small birds that will spawn in the center of the boss arena. After a while, the boss will summon fire tornadoes which will spin all around the arena. Try to avoid them while running through fire circles to collect a haze buff, because after a bit of time the boss will crash towards the center of the boss room, which is your chance to lust and burn the boss as much as possible. While doing so, be sure to interrupt the two adds which will try to heal the boss during this downtime. In comparison, Shanax is a very simple fight. Just stack him on top of his dogs and cleave him down. Be sure to have the DPS attack Rage Face whenever he pounces on a player, otherwise focus Shanax almost entirely. Bale Rock is another fight that's simply a tank and spank, but if you do have a DPS or anybody in the group that starts to get too many stacks of a dot debuff, just make sure to take a step away from a nearby crystal so it can tether to a new target. The second to last boss is a druid boss which should change shape depending on how many group members are stacked together. There's currently two different strategies to take him down. Either have the tank stacked together on top of the group so then the boss turns into a scorpion. For this strategy, everybody has to stack together and DPS the boss down. This strategy works as long as the healers are able to keep up with the damage that will hit the entire group. Otherwise, you can spread lightly and have the tanks kite the boss around, which will have him assume a cat form. While in cat form, the boss will leap to random players, which will leave fire novas on the ground. Simply utilize the entire room to kite the boss all over the place while staying out of the fire. The last boss is Ragnaros. For the most part, everybody will stand on the left-hand side of the boss and then DPS him down. At some point throughout the encounter, the boss will slam down his hammer, spawning a bunch of adds on left and right-hand side of the room. You gotta kill the adds or stun them in order to slow them down to make sure they don't reach the hammer. Afterwards, P2 will begin. During P2, you'll start all on the left-hand side of the room until the boss spawns fire seeds. Afterwards, the entire raid needs to go from the left-hand side of the raid to the right-hand side, moving away from the seeds. The seeds will spawn a bunch of adds, which the tanks will try to pick up. Afterwards, you get another hammer phase where you gotta DPS the adds and stun them to make sure they don't reach the hammer. And for the P3, you just DPS the boss until he hits less than 10%, where the encounter ends and you can collect your reward. And that's essentially how you clear out the entire time walking raid for Firelands, but also how you can maximize your gear gains on any of your ults during time walking weeks. And compared to just doing time walking dungeons, these are so much more lucrative and allowed every one of my characters to gain more item levels more quickly. Definitely worth being on the lookout for any of the time walking weeks if you are trying to gear some ults in Dragonflight. But otherwise, I want to thank all of you so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.